Guys, my name is Felipe, and I'm a Capoeira Contramestre, and I'm going to explain you how the criminalization of Capoeira happened in Brazil and how the decriminalization also happened in Brazil, which they happen in very hilarious and funny occasions. Of course, what could we expect from those people that lived in the 19th century? Those slave owners, right? So for the first, when the parade that legitimated the coup d'état in Brazil happened in 1889, yeah, the parade, the coup that put the emperor away from charge, from power, and installed in Brazil a republican way of governing the country. When it happened, Brazil and the rest of the world, we lived in a very special way of living. Ethnocentrism. It meant that the Europeans, just as the elites in Brazil, they thought that they were the center of the world, and slaves, African, Asian, they were not even considered people, right? So when this happened in Brazil, for example, we had some policies that started in the empire period. That those policies, they had the objective to whiten Brazilian population. So it meant that in order to be perfect, for a human to be perfect, for a human to be human, they had to be white, right? So that makes no sense. And Capoeira had already proven its power in the decades before. For example, in the Paraguay War, when Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, they went into war against Solano Lopez, the Paraguayan governor then. And in this war, the capoeiristas and black people, when I say black people, please, I don't mean to put black people down. It's just a didactic way for me and for you people to understand what I mean. So the black people, they had a great participation in this war, since the landlords, the slave lords, they didn't want to go to war, so they would send representatives, right? And who would go? Black people. So, and among these black people, there are many capoeiristas with all those physical skills that even were recognized by Brazilian policy makers, right? So we went and we won the war. The Allies won the war. Back in time, and during that time, the personal security guard of the Emperor Dom Pedro II, it was composed of capoeiristas, of people who were practicing the capoeiragem, right? The capoeiragem, like capoeiraing, yeah. So people who were doing it, they were in the security guard of the Emperor, and etc. And the diverse conflicts that capoeiristas would have with the police in the streets, and capoeiristas would be, well, victorious, would be the winners of these conflicts. However, even a police officer from Rio de Janeiro said then that capoeira was a mental disease that was spreading in our civilized society. So capoeira was also taken as a mental disease. Not only capoeira, but the behavior of Afro descendants in Brazil, they were taken as a disease. There was even an American studious, I don't know what he did study, but he came up with draptomania. Draptomania, it was a mental disease that would be applied to black slaves in Brazil, and this disease said that people, they are sick because they have draptomania, and draptomania means that they have the will to run away. And so willing to run away from the farms, from the senzalas, was actually understood as a disease. Can you imagine? Think you live in non-human conditions at all. You live like an animal. You are human. You have a consciousness. You live in that place. It's obvious and natural that you want to leave, that you want to run away, isn't that? However, this action was taken as a disease, as a mental disease. Another mental disease that's very funny is that the slaves, they didn't recognize the right of property that the white landlords had over them, which is obvious. Nobody owns anybody, and well, it was not different then, especially in those people, right? So yes, this behavior was taken as a mental disease, which is it just shows us a way that through time every dominant society uses methods and ways to control the people to legitimate their right to power, which is never legitimate because well, all this nature belongs to everybody. However, so capoeira, due to its power and to the power of capoeiristas within that society, within the Brazilian society of then, capoeira was included in the criminal code of the republic, because Brazil was an empire before the parade, before the coup, and after that Brazil became a republic, right? And they had to make a new criminal code, and capoeira was included in that. The article 402 of the law 847. If you wanna research, it's called Decreto Lei 847 or Law 847 Brazil 1890. You're gonna find it in the article 402. It was written. I'm going to translate from Portuguese into English. Do in the streets and the public squares exercises of agility and physical skills known as capoeira, run, having guns and instruments that can produce any physical damage, making crowds or disorder, threatening people, and putting terror of any kind. So yes, capoeira had to do with all this. Capoeira was a gun, even in the criminal code of Brazil today. If you do some martial art and you have a fight in the street and by chance you kill someone, this is going to be understood as a white gun. So martial arts and capoeira was included in that. Capoeira was able to provoke physical damage, crowd, and disorder. That's what the capoeiristas did. Then of course, rebellion against oppression, that's what we do. So the penalty, you would go to jail, varying from 2 to 6 months. And the paragraph says that if you belonged to a banda ou malta, there were groups of capoeiristas that would go in the streets making mess against society, which was then right, because that society didn't deserve any respect. And if you were the boss, you would have the double penalty. So instead of 2 to 6 months, you would have from 4 to 1 year prison, right? So in case you are taken again, you are a capoeirista, you go into jail and then you go out. This is the article 403. Again, it would be applied the penalties of article 400, which says that basically you would be in jail for 1 to 3 years in colonies, that is 2 islands that Brazil had then, and you would even go to military prisons, or you would go to prisons that were located in the borders of Brazilian territory. So that's basically they had to put it specifically that capoeira is danger and it must be punished, right? So even in this code, in this law here, in the article 1, it says, as in any democracy nowadays, it says that everything must be subordinated to law. It means that if capoeira weren't written here, it wouldn't be a crime. Since it's here, it is a crime, because they could not mention capoeira, and I was doing capoeira in the street and they would come, I would say I'm not doing capoeira, but since the name was there, capoeira, and they even specified exercises of physical abilities and skill, etc., named capoeira, so they had a certain fear of us, it would be punished. Okay, so that's basically how capoeira came into the criminal code of Brazil. So capoeira was forbidden for some years. Afterwards, Mestre Pastinha opened the first academy, which was not forbidden because it says explicitly here streets. So Mestre Pastinha in 1912 opened the first Capoeira Academy in Brazil. That was an academy, it was indoors, so there was no crime. And it's worth also to mention that through time, from 1889, when Brazil became a republic, there is still much of the empire, so it didn't change that much. And as time passed until 1912, things got more flexible, and Mestre Pastinha got the first academy. Some years after that, Mestre Bimba came and created the Luta Regional Baiana, the Brazilian regional, the Baiana regional fight, that was, as Capoeira was known then. He started to challenge people that would practice the other martial arts, and he won over all of them. In the 1930s, Mestre Bimba made a Capoeira show for the governor of Bahia, Juraci Magalhães. The governors and policymakers, they started to see that actually Capoeira didn't represent that great danger as they thought, right? And the decriminalization of Capoeira, it happened really in a simple way. It's just in any democracy, it must be in law, right? And in 1940, we lived in a dictatorship of Getúlio Vargas. Well, to me, one of the best presidents we had, even though he was a dictator. He was a dictator, but I think the dictatorship was necessary then, because we really lived in an oppression, even more oppressed before the dictatorship of Getúlio Vargas. And he created a new criminal code that didn't include Capoeira. And that's how Capoeira came out from criminality. From 1940, it was already legal. People were already practicing Capoeira, not in the streets, but in academies. But now it was legal because it was not mentioned in any law. And if it's not in law, I don't have to do it, or I don't have to not do it. It must be there, right? So that's basically a little bit of the history of the criminalization of Capoeira and the decriminalization of Capoeira too, which was very interesting. So that's basically it. Bye.